We have a wonderful program coming up right now. It's a special program from the Connecticut Women's Hall of Fame, and it is led by Liz Krebs, who is a delightful person. And Liz, thank you so much, and take it away.
Thank you. Thank you so much, and thank you for inviting me to share our stories about our wonderful Connecticut women to all of you during your annual meeting. So I'm just going to share my screen. So thank you again. As Peter had just mentioned, my name is Liz Krebs, and I am the Education Manager at the Connecticut Women's Hall of Fame. I want to thank you all for coming. And again, it's been a pleasure to sit in on your board meeting, your annual meeting, and learn about all the remarkable programs that you offer to our community. It's very, very impressive. So we are actually towards the end of March, and March is Women's History Month, so it's no better time to be able to share our women's stories, our Connecticut women's stories, with all of you today. For 28 years, the Connecticut Women's Hall of Fame has been dispelling cultural myths and misguided notions about women's abilities. Our mission is to honor the achievements of women by celebrating their legacies and telling their powerful stories, inspiring women and girls to realize their own limitless potential. We do this in a number of ways. We host an annual induction ceremony every year, where we first tell the stories of our new class of inductees. Their stories, along with those of our existing 136 inductees, then form the basis of our ongoing educational programming, which inspires over 65,000 people each year. Our induction ceremony for 2022 is titled Women in Sports. It will be held at the Connecticut Convention Center on October 20th, 2022, and tickets will be available soon. We are also proud to share the stories of our inductees in different ways. We provide traveling exhibits for display in the community, specifically our brand new exhibit, our newest exhibit, Rise Up Sisters, which chronicles the contributions of Connecticut women to the women's suffrage movement. We offer free curricular resources. For schools, from lessons about amazing Connecticut women in STEM to materials of many Connecticut women's firsts throughout the 19th, 20th, and 21st centuries. We also visit students directly in elementary, middle, and high school classrooms around the state. And we offer webinars, which is called A Conversation Between, and it's really simple. It's just a gathering of women talking about today's issues. And we give programs, which today you're going to hear, which is called our Talks on the Road series. And this is given to the public, to organizations like yours, to libraries, to school PTAs, to adults in any small groups. Today, however, we have the opportunity to focus on the rich contributions of some of Connecticut's remarkable Jewish women whose work has had lasting impact on our society. Across multiple fields, these women have had a hand in many of the most significant events and changes in Connecticut history. Their accomplishments are as varied as their struggles, and their stories inspire us to create new history. Some are names we know well, while others are too often overlooked treasures waiting to be rediscovered and remembered for their important work. All are extraordinary, and I hope you'll enjoy meeting some of Connecticut's remarkable women. As we'll see, their paths were not always smooth, as many of them faced a double whammy of gender discrimination, as well as deep-seated anti-Semitism. I wanted to begin I want to begin by tracing some of the history that helps put their stories into context. Much of this material you will learn about in a few minutes draws from a wonderful book called A Jewish History of Connecticut by Betty N. Hoffman. From the founding of the Connecticut colony in the 1630s, the Congregational Church had a strong hold on many aspects of life and wielded enormous power. The earliest records of Jews in Connecticut indicate that they may have been traveling merchants. During the American Revolution, many Jewish families fled British-occupied New York and Newport, Rhode Island, and settled primarily in Fairfield County temporarily. The first permanent Jewish immigrants to Connecticut probably arrived in the early 19th century. They established a presence in larger cities like New Haven, Hartford, Stamford, and Norwalk. These early immigrants came primarily from Spain, Portugal, North Africa, and the Middle East. They were followed by large waves of German-speaking Jews in the 1830s who quickly outnumbered the earlier arrivals. Throughout all of this time, Jewish residents of Connecticut could not legally establish their own houses of worship. It was not until 1843 that the law has changed. The largest waves of Jewish immigrants arrived between 1880 and 1920 as Jews fled increasing oppression in Russia and other Eastern European countries. They brought with them a wide range of new customs, skills, and cultural elements to the New World. And to give you an idea of the magnitude of immigration during this time, Hartford, for example, saw its Jewish population rise from 1,500 in 1880 to more than 18,000 by 1920. Today, we'll explore the story of one young woman, Sonia Kalish, whose family was among this wave of immigrants and who arrived in the United States when she was just a few months old. You know her by a different name, but we'll get there in a few minutes. Immigration across the board was slowed by the outbreak of World War I, and then again by Congress's passage of the Immigration Restriction Acts of the 1920s that severely limited the numbers and countries of origin of new immigrants to the United States. During this time, Jewish communities began to turn their attention increasingly to strengthen their local enclaves, developing cultural and social institutions, and to expanding outside cities. Anti-Semitism was a major issue in Connecticut as it was elsewhere in the United States. Oops, I went a little fast there. Some Connecticut neighborhoods did not allow Jewish residents. Many companies indulged in discriminatory hiring practices. Colleges enforced strict maximum quotas for Jewish students. As the Nazis rose to power in Europe during the 1930s, the US Congress refused to revise immigration policy to allow for refugees fleeing mounting oppression in Germany and elsewhere. However, some Jewish immigrants did make it to the United States during this time, and we'll meet one of them, Anni Albers, who brought her art with her and broke new ground for women in the arts. After the end of World War II and the discovery of the atrocities committed in Europe, Congress relaxed its immigration stance. And by 1952, Jewish refugees and immigrants had begun arriving in force once again. New post-war opportunities for education, combined with improved infrastructure, offered increased possibility for expansion into the suburbs and for upward mobility for many immigrant families. A Final major wave of Jewish immigrants began arriving in the 1960s after new Cold War immigration legislation made it possible for those fleeing to the Soviet Union to immigrate to the United States to escape oppression. This wave lasted until the end of the 20th century. All of this history has led to a diverse and thriving network of Jewish communities in Connecticut, and Jewish women have made major contributions to the development of our state, our nation, and our world. They struggled alongside other groups of American women to secure their right to vote, to expand education and employment opportunities, and to pave the way for future generations to see just how much
inside of something
can accomplish.
Right there. So let's go back again. Click on anything, Control Shift.
I hear something, so okay, that's better. So today we're going to explore, I've been asked to explore Jewish women specifically in the arts. So we're going to really stay within that area of focus. So let's begin. So when Sonia Kalic was born in Ukraine in 1886, her parents had no idea that she would become one of the most recognized voices in American entertainment. Fleeing oppression in Tsarist Russia, the family immigrated to Hartford, arriving when Sonia was just 3 months old. They took the name Abuza and opened a restaurant. Talented from a young age, Sophie began singing for tips in the family restaurant. Though she wanted a career in show business, her family had other, more traditional plans. At age 17, she married Louis Tuck and quickly had a son, Bert. Dissatisfied with her life, Sophie soon divorced Tuck and moved to New York City, leaving her son in her sister Anna's care. Determined to make a better life for herself and procure the means with which to better support her family, Sophie Tucker, as she was now called, began singing in small cafes where she could find work. In 1907, she began performing on the vaudeville stage, but her managers and producers forced her to perform in blackface makeup. They didn't think that an overweight Jewish woman could connect with audiences. She endured and garnered a small following among theatergoers. It wasn't until one night when her makeup was stolen and she was forced to go on stage as herself that her career began to take off. Suddenly, she was catapulted to the forefront of the entertainment scene, becoming a headliner and appearing on stage with many of the top stars of that time, including Will Rogers, Jack Benny, and Fanny Brice. She also began recording songs, beginning in 1911 with Some of These Days, which would become her trademark. So let's take a listen to a slightly later recording from 1927.
Some of these days you'll be so lonely. Some of these days you'll miss me, honey. You'll miss my hugging. You're gonna miss my kissing. You're gonna miss me, honey, when I'm far away. I feel so lonely for you only, 'cause you know, honey, you've had your way. And when you leave me, you know it's gonna grieve me. Gonna miss your big fat mama, your mama. Some of these days, some of these days, you'll miss me, honey. Some of these days.
Soon, she was touring with her own band, and even appearing in early talkie films. Her career spanned more than 5 decades, and she continued performing until very shortly before her death in 1966. But no matter how famous she became, Tucker never forgot her humble roots and devoted much of her later life to philanthropy. Though she is remembered for stage and screen work, as well as the last of the Red Hot Mamas, she is also fondly remembered for her work on multiple causes: women's health, education, theater and the arts, and her beloved Emmanuel Synagogue in Hartford. From musical entertainer Sophie Tucker, we move on to a different facet of the arts where several of Connecticut's remarkable Jewish women were active. We'll begin with Anni Albers, who fled Nazi oppression in the 1930s to come to the United States, where her groundbreaking career as a textile and graphic artist continued to thrive. Anneliese Fleischmann was born in Berlin in 1899 to affluent parents who encouraged her to pursue her passion for the arts. In 1922, she enrolled at the famous Bauhaus School for the Arts, where she began taking classes in weaving after being denied admittance to the school's glass program because of her gender. During her time at Bauhaus, she developed innovative techniques.
Thank you.
Also, when you empty the dishwasher, please put things away.
I couldn't, I had to come back here and I was hungry. Also, where did you put the parts of my, let me just.
Vivian,
Please mute yourself, thank you. So in 1922, she enrolled at the famous Bauhaus School for the Arts, where she began taking classes in weaving after being denied admittance to the school's glass program because of her gender. During her time at Bauhaus, she developed innovative techniques for creating textile works that were both aesthetically pleasing and functional. In 1925, she married fellow artist Joseph Albers, and in 1928 accepted a teaching position at Bauhaus, where she remained until the school was shuttered by the Nazis in 1933. At that time, the Alberses were fortunate to immigrate to the United States, where they accepted teaching positions at Black Mountain College in North Carolina. Anni Albers specialized in weaving, and during the first decade and a half of her time in the United States, her work was shown across the country and received much critical acclaim. In 1949, she became the first weaver to have a solo exhibition at the Museum of Modern Art in New York. This exhibition and the subsequent traveling exhibit that showcased her work cemented her as the preeminent textile artist of the 20th century. And here's a sample for textiles. She was known for both traditional works, such as this sample, as well as the sample on the right, which is called City. It's a pictorial weaving. Immediately following her exhibition at MoMA, the Alberses moved to New Haven, where Joseph had accepted a position at Yale University. Annie continued to exhibit, weave, lecture, and write. She also designed textiles for Harvard and began to work on the development of mass-producible fabric patterns. Annie was a prolific writer of books and articles. She published On Designing in 1959 and her influential text on weaving in 1965. And then another book in 2001 called Selected Writings on Design. In the 1970s, she devoted her energies exclusively to graphic art. While this may seem like a significant change in medium, her graphic art has many design elements in common with her earlier works, including their use of earth tones, geometric shapes, and repetition. Anni Albers continued to lecture and make prints until her death in 1994 in Orange, Connecticut. She was the last surviving teacher of the Bauhaus. As we've seen, many of the historical factors that influenced Jewish immigration to Connecticut were instrumental in the lives of these remarkable women. The lives of Annie Albers and Sophie Tucker were all influenced by those major waves of immigration. The remaining inductees that we'll meet today all follow in their footsteps in terms of widening the path for women, but their lives and careers come after those major migration patterns we discussed earlier. Helen Frankenthaler was a younger contemporary of Annie Albers and a prolific and influential artist in her own right. Born in 1928 in New York City, Frankenthaler was the daughter of New York State Supreme Court Justice Alfred Frankenthaler and his wife Martha Lowenstein, who both encouraged her talent from a young age. She was educated in progressive experimental schools. At age 15, she enrolled in the Dalton School, where she studied under the great Mexican muralist Rufino Tamayo, before completing her undergraduate work at Bennington College in Vermont. After graduating in 1949, she returned to New York City, the New York City set, on expanding her influence in the art world. A year later, she organized an exhibition for Bennington alumni artists in New York, and this was her big break. She met Clement Greenberg, William de Kooning, Jackson Pollock, and others. Through these connections, her work was selected for an exhibit featuring unknown artists, and her career took off from there. She had her first solo gallery exhibition in 1951. Though her style differed greatly from the layered look of Jackson Pollock's pieces, she began to explore abstract expressionism under his influence. Frankenthaler pioneered the technique of staining unprimed canvas with oil paints, what she called her soap stain techniques. Her first major work, Mountains and Sea, appeared in 1952. These are just some of the, here it is. Here's the oil on canvas. In the 1960s, she began to experiment with alternative media and embraced printmaking, woodcuts, and lithographs. She continued experimenting with different media, including clay and steel sculpture, and even designed sets and costumes for England's Royal Ballet. And this is called Free Fall. And you can see her attention to color in her paintings, and many credit her with expanding the boundaries of Cubism. But Frankenthaler had a fiercely independent spirit. For example, against advice from markers, she refrained from movement from large to small canvas work, despite the lack of purchases for larger pieces. Throughout her career, she exhibited at nearly every prestigious venue in the world. She also fought against being labeled as a feminine painter and had to deal with tremendous bias against women artists, particularly in European markets. All of the challenges paid off, as prices for her work are among the highest of any female artists. And now we're going to take a look at some of our inductees who were women photographers, very famous in the world. Margaret Bourke-White shattered gender barriers to become one of the most prolific photographers of the first half of the 20th century. Her fearless approach to work brought her to some of the world's most important events and gave her the opportunity to document some of the key figures in those events. During World War II, as well as wars that came after, she traveled overseas and took photographs of the war so that people at home could better understand what was going on. Some of her assignments put her at great personal risk as she captured images of bombs falling and other dangerous moments. One of the unique things we do at the Hall is produce short documentary films about each of our inductees. So let's take a look at Margaret Bourke-White's film to get a sense of the scope of her work over her 30-year career. And just as a warning, in this clip, you will see some of the photographs that Margaret took of those killed in Nazi concentration camps. And this could be disturbing to some viewers. Margaret bore witness to many events surrounding World War II and helped bring the war to people's eyes and ears back home. Not only was she the first female photographer for Life magazine, but she was also their first female war correspondent and the first Western photographer to be admitted into the Soviet Union. She also interviewed and photographed Mahatma Gandhi hours before he was assassinated in 1948. So let's take a listen, take a view.
At the end of the war, Margaret traveled through Germany with General Patton and was one of the first photojournalists to document the horrors of the concentration camps as they were liberated, producing some of her most iconic photographs.
She speaks in her autobiography quite openly about the camera kind of providing that protective layer so that she could continue with the work without being so distraught. It's an incredibly powerful series, and it was hugely influential on her life.
In addition to having documented the atrocities afflicted on people of Jewish heritage during the Holocaust, Margaret herself was born to a Jewish father. However, she kept this a secret for most of her life, influenced by her mother's own anti-Semitism. It wasn't until later in life that Margaret overcame the self-judgment and was open about her background. We'll end our time today exploring one of our inductees who has spent her entire career documenting cultural phenomena with her camera. Annie Leibovitz is perhaps the most respected and most prolific photographer of the 20th century, and her immense body of work encompasses some of the most well-known portraits of our time. One of the unique things we do, as I mentioned earlier, we produce short documentaries about each of our inductees. We did the same with Annie. Because Annie's work is so visual in nature, I thought it would be fun for us to hear more about her life and career through the video.
Annie Leibovitz has been chronicling American culture for over 40 years, with her iconic photographs gracing the covers of magazines like Rolling Stone, Vanity Fair, and Vogue, and with the publication of her best-selling books. Ms. Leibovitz is one of the most respected and sought-after photographers in the world, whose body of work is not only comprehensive in its breadth, but stunning in its brilliance. Annie Leibovitz always knew she wanted to be involved in the arts in some way, attending the San Francisco Art Institute in the early 1970s.
I didn't know I would be interested in photography until I went to the Art Institute and took a night class of photography and found it very, compelling. I found it very immediate gratification. You had a camera and you could go out in the world and you could be there, you had a purpose.
While earning her degree, Annie took some of her photographs to Rolling Stone. They were quickly published, and she began working for the magazine.
I think I was so young at the time, and I think Rolling Stone was really glad to have me because I was probably inexpensive, It was also an interesting idea that being a young girl going out and taking pictures, no one took you seriously. No one thought that you were going to do anything particularly special or that it was going to be anything. You know, they weren't worried about, you know, what you were doing. And I was sort of, you know, on some level could be very astute, you know, could come in and go in and do things that would be kind of surprising.
Over the course of 13 years, Ms. Leibovitz's photographs appeared on 140 Rolling Stone magazine covers, including the classic 1980 photo of John Lennon and Yoko Ono. In 1983, Ms. Leibovitz left Rolling Stone magazine.
Annie had just made a transition from Rolling Stone, where she had been or become the most important rock music photographer in the country.
I was beginning to be perceived as a rock and roll photographer, and I didn't particularly think of myself that way. I thought of myself as a photographer. Rolling Stone had moved to New York. Vanity Fair was just starting up, and I felt that it was an interesting time to leave Rolling Stone and broaden my base of the kind of assignment that I had. Like anyone doing a reporting job, you would do your research and you would find out about the person you were going to photograph. As far as Whoopi Goldberg was concerned, she was part of a series of upcoming young comedians, and she was unknown. In her nightclub routine, one of the things she does is she plays a little black girl who thinks that if she scrubs herself, underneath will be white, you know, that if she could scrub off her black skin. So I just had this idea of putting Whoopi in a bathtub, and she could pretend she's scrubbing herself.
Annie Leibovitz's photographs convey her nuanced perspective.
I really felt like I could do a better job if I had a point of view, and that by having a point of view, I could create a stronger picture.
During this incredibly creative time at Vanity Fair, Annie raised the recognition level of the magazine, the people she photographed, and herself with one provocative photograph after another. In 1983, Annie began publishing collections of her work, featuring her portrait work, followed by 8 other books.
She does the whole thing. The books from the beginning to end are done in her studio. She's the arbiter of what goes into the book, how they're presented. Everything about it is Annie.
It's the only place for myself where I can express myself. When you work for a magazine, you're working for somebody, or an editor with his own, you know, idea. The only place where my work is really me is really it are the books.
Leibovitz's best-selling book, Women, explores the wide diversity of women and their many roles in our society. It was published in 1999 with Susan Sontag, Annie's partner of 15 years.
It was Susan Sontag's idea. I think that what really sent it on its way, and really, when I really decided that it could be a book, was the series of pictures that I did in Las Vegas of the show Women. And it was really an extraordinary series to me. It's probably one of the strongest set of pictures I've ever done. But to me, it was the beginning of the Women's Book Project. I realized that there really wasn't a collection of what we look like. We sort of don't know what we look like, you know, and we have preconceived ideas about who we are. The best thing that anyone ever told me about it, Karen Finley, who's a performance artist who's in the book, she's the woman shot from the back. She called me after the book came out, and she told me that her daughter, who must have been 9 at the time, looked through the book and said, "Mommy, when I grow up, I want to be a woman." You know, and so I love that. It's my favorite thing anyone ever said about anything I've ever done.
Annie has photographed some of the most iconic people and moments of the past several decades, and her work is a living testament to the power of the image. Even in our selfie culture, there's something about her approach to photography that cuts through the noise and clutter to show us the essential beauty of people. As we've seen, the impact of Jewish women in Connecticut has been vast and varied. They've challenged the status quo and changed the ways we understand our society. And many of them did so with all the odds stacked against them. And one major way we can honor the legacy of those who came before us is by remembering and sharing their stories, reminding one another not to take for granted the possibilities open to us because of their sacrifices. We can also make sure to find our own ways to create social change, and perhaps even more importantly, to help the next generation of women leaders to find and use their voices to create new history. It starts by introducing them to positive role models who show us all what we can become. If you'd like to learn more about the women I have shared today, or about any of our 136 inductees, please visit our website at www.cwhf.org. And you can follow us on social media. We're on every social media challenge. So I'm going to close by showing you a video of all of our inductees put to the music Bread and Roses, a traditional song sang at marches for women's rights.
As we go marching, marching in the beauty of the day, a million darkened kitchens, 1,000 mill lofts gray, are touched with all the radiance that a sudden sun discloses. For the people hear us singing, bread and roses, bread and roses. As we go marching, marching, we battle too for men, for they are women's children, and we mother them again. Our lives shall not be sweated from birth until life closes. Hearts starve as well as bodies. Give us bread, but give us roses. As we go marching, marching, unnumbered women dead, go crying through our singing, their ancient call for bread, small heart and love and beauty, their grudging spirits new. Yes, it is bread we fight for, but we fight for roses too. As we go marching, marching, we think of braver days. The rising of our women meets the rising of our race. No more will the drudge neither tent and toil where one reposes, but the sharing of life's glories, bread and roses, bread and roses, bread and roses, bread and roses. Our lives shall not be sweated from birth until life closes. Hearts starve as well as bodies, bread and roses, bread and roses.
Thank you all for hosting the hall to share at our remarkable Jewish women of Connecticut. I'm going to stop sharing. And if there are any questions, I'm happy to share, to answer. And thank you.
I have a question for you. First, I didn't even know about the Connecticut Women's Hall of Fame. And this was a great presentation. I really appreciate hearing about these amazing women. And my question to you is, if you weren't limited to selecting women from the arts, which women would you have chosen to highlight today?
So there are a couple of other women that we typically share in this presentation. So Beatrice Fox is one, Beatrice Auerbach Fox, or Fox Auerbach. I'm a little, it's either one or the other. I have to check, sorry. And the other one is Rabbi Judy Cohen. So those are two that are typically in this presentation, but again, I focused on women who are in the arts.
That's great. So is the museum open, or is this a by appointment only?
So we're not an in-person museum, we're a virtual museum. Okay. So we actually come to you and your organizations or schools. So I'm the education manager, so I'm usually the one who leads the programs to adults. Some of our other staff support the presentation programming as well. I do go into schools and I teach this information to our schools, really with the thought of empowering the next generation, using these stories as a backdrop to move forward and not get stuck, and really achieve what they want to achieve in their field, in their dream field. So I go into schools and I teach about this material. Similar to this type of program, we have a number of other different programs that is really based on different subject areas. Like we have a science program on women in science. Then we have a program that is women who really achieve success within the compounds of democracy. They pushed past no, they didn't take no for an answer, so they kept on going. We talk about Marian Anderson, which a lot of people have heard of. She's from Danbury, Connecticut. And we talk about her, what she did, and she didn't take no as an answer. And she, again, was discriminated against because she was a woman and also because of her race. So it's really, we come to you. So if you know of any organizations who would like to host the hall, or any schools, that we're always we always are excited to partner with new schools. And to be honest, in Fairfield County, we're not that well known, which is really so exciting for me to be with all of you today to share our mission with all of you, and hopefully, we'll be able to expand on that to other organizations and schools. And actually, my kids, my son graduated from bicultural as well. So I've done a few little things with them, not a lot, but we've invited them to some of our, we have a number of different girl-centered programs that are grant funded and free to schools as well. So it's not necessarily always a charge. But we're excited to share it with any school, any organization in Connecticut.
Oh,
great, thank you.
Good questions, Jill. Great. So, Liz, that was fabulous. Just terrific. And as I was thinking about this program, I said, "Wow, terrific! This will be." But you know what? It's beyond what I thought it was going to be. It was terrific, and I think that it taught us all a lot. And I know that many people here within our organization obviously knew of these women, or some of them pretty well, but we got an extremely well-rounded presentation, Liz, and I thank you very much. So I just have a couple of closing comments to make. One is
there is one question from Gail in the chat.
Oh, excuse me.
What is the process to choose the women in the Hall of Fame?
So We actually asked the public to nominate people. If you go to our website, there is a tab that you can nominate someone that you feel should be inducted into the Connecticut Women's Hall of Fame, because we don't always come across everybody. We're always told about people that we might not have heard of. So we always like to hear from the community. The person had to either have been born in Connecticut or lived in Connecticut while they were achieving their success, and overcame their barriers, obviously, to move forward as, based on their gender and race and whatever barriers they had in front of them. Basically, all the names are shared with our Board of Trustees, and our Board of Trustees chooses the women who are typically are inducted. Doesn't have to be, we do induct posthumous, so it doesn't have to be living, it could be passed away. And every year we do have a theme that we stay to within, for our induction ceremony. So this year, as you heard, it's women in sports. So we're focused on inducting 3 women in sports who overcame their own barriers to achieve success, because in sports there's such a disparity between women and men still. So we're really excited about that theme for this year's induction ceremony. And you can always reach out to me if you have any more questions. I know I'll give you my email, so you can reach out to me if you have any other questions or want to chat.
I can tell you that there's tons of stuff in the chat.
I
Everybody loves it. It was great. And I just reviewed a lot of the stuff in the chat, and it's really terrific.